So, hi. I work here at Atlassian, and I've been part of a huge group of people here who have been, over the last year or so, rebuilding the navigation that you'll see in our products. So, if you use Atlassian products, you've probably seen our new navigation. If not, you will see it very soon. So, moving from, let's see if I can get my pointer working today. Here we go. Yeah, so moving from the one at the back here to the one at the front. It's been a huge effort, heaps and heaps of people working on it. Yeah, I've been able to play a part in that, which has been a lot of fun. In the last few months, I've been looking at adding drag and drop capabilities into the sidebar. And what I wanted to do tonight was to go through all the little things we had to do to make that real, right? Because I think it looks simple, hopefully it looks simple. Hopefully it's just easy, but there's a lot of details, lurking underneath the surface, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, working on software. There's often a lot of things you need to do to make something feel great. So that's what I'm going to do tonight, to sort of pick apart all these little pieces. So firstly, what can it do? This side nav that we've got drag and drop in. So you can have like reordering, in groups. You can do top level reordering, so you can like reorder from the top level. We also support tree operations. So pretty much anything you could think of in a tree, so if you use Confluence, the page tree on the side, like all that kind of stuff, hovering over items, automatically expanding, creating new groups, making new children, moving things around, right? Very rich interactions in there. And that's just some of the examples. Pretty much you can do really whatever you want in terms of wiring it up. It also works on mobile. So here it is working on iOS as well. So you can see you kind of got the same experience there. And we've also done a lot of work to make sure that it has a great story for folks who are using assistive technologies. So yeah, if you're using a screen reader, keyboard, that kind of stuff, you're going to be able to achieve the same outcomes in a way that's delightful for you with those technologies as well, which I'll go into a little bit later. Something to keep in mind, though, as I'm speaking tonight, is that all this stuff, what I've been helping build is like the Lego bricks, I guess, to add this functionality into the sidebar. If you're using Atlassian products, you won't necessarily start seeing these operations everywhere straight away. They'll sort of be incrementally being added. I think they're in a few places already, but more and more over time. It's not like you'll necessarily go away and see this exact experience. We sort of built the building blocks to enable it. Cool. So yeah, let's take a look at how it works. At the outset, all the underlying drag and drop behavior is powered by a library that I helped build called Pragmatic Drag and Drop, which is a wrapper around the web platform's drag and drop functionality. Now, it's super low level. It has no opinions about what anything should look like. It just sort of makes the web platform more sane to work with. So everything that you're seeing in terms of drag and drop today is powered by that. But all the visual choices that we've made, if you wanted to use this library, you could use those visual choices. We make it easy for you to do that, but you can actually do basically anything you want as well, just so you know. Cool. So how I've thought about how to explain this is to go through the user journey and sort of look at all the pieces we needed to do to make every bit of that, hopefully, as good as it kind of can be. All right. So before the drag starts, before it even starts a drag and drop operation, we need to make it clear to them what can be dragged, right? So on the side nav, we do this in two ways. So one, we have a little drag handle cursor that you'll see over there. Sorry, icon. And we also have a grab hand cursor. So they're the two things that we're using in this particular experience to communicate that something is draggable. So those two entities. We've previously done a lot of work thinking about how to communicate drag and drop through the whole interaction. And we've put together some pretty rich guidelines on that, and it's layered. So what we have here is what we've identified for the side nav is that drag and drop is not necessarily a primary interaction. Like usually when you're going to the nav, you're just trying to like navigate, right? Not necessarily move things around. So these particular affordances, only showing the icon on hover and having a delayed grab hand is what we use for entities that support drag and drop, but it's not their primary function. It's like a secondary thing because we don't want it to sort of get in the way of that primary action. It's sort of the thinking behind it. So to just sort of illustrate what it could look like, if we turn the drag handles on without hover, you can see it starts to add a lot of noise into that experience, and we do turn it on for some things, you'll notice in our products, but that's more when drag and drop is kind of like the main thing you're doing with it, whereas here we sort of decided that it's more of a secondary interaction. And we can reduce that clutter by not making it visible all the time. Yes, so that's it on hover. So we show it on hover. Oh, am I showing here? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so this is it. Yeah, to show something's draggable. And then this is when obviously something's not draggable, you don't get that icon or the grab hand. All right, so let's take a bit of time by thinking about this drag handle. Honestly, a lot of time now I'm going to spend talking about this particular icon. This icon's great, it's really great, really clear communication that this thing is a draggable entity. And I'm going to talk about some of the thinking that went into how to make it look the way it does, how it behaves the way it does. So taking a step back, actually going to think about performance. So this is usually what happens when we're shipping stuff to production, right? You have all your modules usually written in, say, TypeScript, which get compiled down to JavaScript. That all gets put in a big bundle and that gets sent down to the client. Usually how it goes. What ends up happening, unfortunately, in a lot of applications is that you over-bundle like too many modules, right? So you send this huge payload of JavaScript down and, they actually only really needed this on that experience. They didn't need all of this. And so you kind of weighed down that page when you didn't need to. So ideally, you're trying to do something like this. You're only shipping the parts that you actually need. Now, this is a good recipe for performance. Like in general, this is a philosophy that we've tried to, that we are continuing to embrace, is that you're trying to only ship the code that user needs, like that product actually needs, right? Anything that's not true, like you don't ship it, right? Or potentially you ship, if there's something they do need, maybe you could delay some of it, right? You could delay a piece of it to come later. But ideally, it's just the things they need and nothing more, right? That's kind of like a really good recipe for getting good performance. Okay, so for us, some experiences, some applications support drag and drop in our product suite and some don't. And some, it'll only be enabled for certain users, right? Or certain experiences or certain pages. So we didn't necessarily want to just bake in this functionality, which sounds, you might say, look, it's just an icon, who cares, just ship it. It's fine, it's tiny, it doesn't really matter. But as a general philosophy for how we've done this new navigation is that we've tried to not do things like that. We've tried to, where possible, try to break things out into their individual pieces so that if a consumer didn't need it, they're not including any code for it. So now we're going to absolutely like over-index on how to get this thing like as performant as possible. Because this is kind of what we want, right? Like the bundle that holds that drag handle code, sits over here and it's only going to be used for the folks and for the products that actually want it. So how can we make this thing optional? Like how do we do that? Well, one simple way to do it in React, there will be a lot of the React examples in here. If you're not familiar with React, I'll try and explain some of the big ideas, but you're welcome to come speak to me afterwards. Okay, so this is a very stripped down idea. This is like a menu item component. And what I've just done is created a prop called drag handle. It's optional. You pass in a React node and we'll just put it in there for you, right? Cool. And then on the consumer side, right, they import this drag handle from somewhere and then they just pass it in as a prop to this thing. And that's kind of it-ish. This actually ticks the box in that, people who don't use that prop, don't import that component, they don't need to include any code for it. kind of good to go. However, that approach is, let me go back. That's what I want, is pretty, what's the word? Dangerous, weak. I don't know what the right word is. But the issue is that as soon as you say just accept React node, people can just pass in whatever they want, right? So here, instead of passing in that great drag handle, we're now passing in something like totally rogue. Which for this particular experience, like the side nav for Atlassian products, we want to be really consistent with what that drag handle is. We don't want people just passing in anything. But for this one, like we do want it to be pretty locked down in how it looks. So what do we do? Well, you could do something like this. So instead of passing a React node, you say, I accept a component. It has to have certain props and all that kind of stuff. But you can technically like work around that. That's not even foolproof. And it's not ideal, right? Like prop, you have to import a whole nother thing and pass it in, but you only want them to pass in ever that one thing, like nothing else. Not ideal. And also you can't even really use that if you want to do like lazy loading. So this is React lazy. So I'm importing lazy from React. This is a dynamic import. So this will split that out into the bundler will split that out into a different chunk, which can then be loaded in independently, right? So what this is saying is like, hey, I'm okay for this little piece to be deferred. Basically, I don't need it straight away. I can have it later, which is perfect for our drag handle because we don't actually see it straight away until you hover. It's like the perfect candidate for load it later. Like you don't actually need it straight away. It's fine if we load it a few seconds after the page is ready. So yeah, but this is all done by the consumer, right? This is what they had to do to get it working. Now, realistically, they may even have to do something like this, where it's the same thing, except now they're importing suspense and they're wrapping it in suspense. So they've created a suspense boundary. I'll explain why it's important in a sec, but yeah, to do lazy loading well, they've basically had to write all this code, which is, again, not great, because if you're asking people to write lots of code in like this, chances are not everyone's going to do it like this. They're going to do it in wild different ways. Like who knows? You're just in trouble, right? If you're kind of relying on everyone doing it in that exact pattern. So, and also we have no safety here at all. Like this could be any component, it could be that my rogue component. So it's just not a great pattern for what we're trying to do. So instead, what we did in this case, which I'm really happy with, is we have this prop on menu item called has drag indicator. Has drag indicator. Yep. It's just a Boolean. So you can turn it on and off. Really easy to consume. You don't really have any choices, nothing much you have to do. And then behind the scenes, this component does the heavy lifting for you, right? So it creates the lazy for that drag handle. It always is creating the one that we want, not for some other thing. And if you set that prop to true, it's going to render the suspense boundary. It's going to render the lazy drag handle and put it in there. And if it's set to false, like this module, the browser will never download it. Right? So this is fantastic, right? We've just sort of got that story around, okay, people just can control it with a prop. We can get the exact experience we want, but we can also get that, split that chunk out. Cool. While we're talking about suspense, in the last few months, I've been on a bit of a journey with suspense to understand it. So I just thought, while we're here, let's just talk about suspense a little bit. If I can find my pointer. Bear with me while I just change over to extend entire screen. Yep. Okay, cool. So now you should see what I see. Yes. Okay. So this is React 19 application, React 18. All these examples work the same for React 18 and React 19. So all we've got is a button that when I click it, it's going to load in a React lazy component and put it down here where it says not loaded yet. So when I do that, you'll notice something bad. Like my whole UI disappeared for a little bit. I'll do that again. And that's because what happens is when React finds a lazy component or anything that throws a promise, it searches up for the closest suspense boundary and renders the fallback UI. In this case, it was that loading string. And so it's basically like unmounted our entire app. And then when that piece is ready, it mounts it again. So yeah. something to keep in mind when you're doing lazy loading. So this is more realistic about what you need to do. So now instead of wrapping that whole section in a suspense boundary, I'm now just wrapping that part that I'm lazy loading. So when I click, you'll see that it didn't unmount the whole thing. It's just that one part, right? Really cool. But really, so yes, in general, if you're using React Lazy, great idea to use suspense as well and be aware of where it is. So imagine in our case, like we had a suspense boundary really high in the app, and then they toggles that flag from false to true somewhere, could potentially like unmount like most of Jira, for example, and then remount the whole thing. Like, would not be good. And for us, we can wrap just the drag handle in suspense because that's really all we care about. It doesn't need a fallback UI. If the user hovers over the item and there's no like icon there for a sec, it's not the end of the world, right? So really great. We could just kind of wrap that lazy in the suspense. While we're talking about suspense, I stumbled onto this. I thought it was really interesting. So what if you don't use any suspense boundary at all, right? So this is React 18 and React 19. I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before as the first example, except there's no suspense boundary. Now I'm going to click lazy load content. And it kind of worked like, yeah. So what happens is it doesn't have any suspense boundary, and it kind of just does a different behavior where it basically suspends around that lazy and then kind of works. So why I think this is really interesting is because you may be writing an application and using React Lazy and having a great time and things are kind of working how you expect. And then someone adds a suspense boundary somewhere in your React tree, and then all of a sudden you're having a really bad time. So I think in general, like probably not a safe idea to lean on this no suspense boundary behavior, because as soon as someone adds it in, like, you're going to be in trouble. But I just thought that was really interesting, kind of poking at those two little things. All right, I will now switch back to extend. Here we go. I used to know the keyboard shortcut for that, but now I do not. Okay, now this is the absolute smallest detail that does not matter, but I just thought it was interesting. So do you do like, do you do wrap? So here we're rendering conditionally that lazy import. Do you have suspense always in your React tree and just conditionally render the lazy part, or do you conditionally render suspense as well? It turns out functionally it doesn't matter in terms of the behavior, suspense, caching, it's all fine. Like both those two things seem to be equivalent. However, we did go for the second one with just the thinking that it's probably better to have less things in the React tree. If you don't need something in the React tree, like don't have it in there, right? So this, I think, makes sense. Like this one, you're just basically whacking all these suspense boundaries in that surely React has to do something with if they're in the tree. It has to process them in some way, whereas here it just, nope, just doesn't do anything with it, like if it's not there. So we went for the second one in this case. Cool. How do we actually show that little icon, right? This is how we do it. So when you've set that prop to be true, we put the element in the DOM, right? We just always keep it in there. And then when you, the menu item sets that drag handle display to be none. And then when you hover over the drag handle, sets it to flex, but you can think of like block. This effectively makes it visible. The alternative to this is, so this is really nice because you get instant hide and show without any JavaScript, right? It's just all CSS, really, really easy. The other way to do this would be you would add an event listener to that thing on mouse enter. You would do something to show that icon, and then when you mouse leave, you would hide it. Now you would probably, if we're just going to talk about React, you do a set state, right? To say like show drag handle, and you would conditionally render that icon and then remove it. That's a lot of code, right? To do that. And you also kind of need to manage, there's more things for you to manage. The advantage of doing it with the React state though, however, is that you don't necessarily have to have that in the DOM the whole time, right? Because you can just not have the element, and then when the event comes, you put it into the DOM and then you take it out. But what this is such, it's like one extra element effectively. Using what we found is that if we can get away with using CSS for this kind of stuff, you're usually going to have a better time. The biggest bottleneck in React is a re-render. So anytime you can sidestep it, like great. Not to say like re-rendering is quick, like it is quick, don't get me wrong, but nothing's going to be really as quick as doing it in the CSS layer. And you save heaps of code in terms of the JavaScript as well. That was a lot of words to say that. Yeah, we use CSS to hide and show it. Cool. So I've drawn some extra boxes here and I'll explain what I'm doing. So at the top level, just how the spacing works in the navigation right now is that there is this like padding around all the items. And each layer you go down in the tree, you get this extra sort of padding on the left to show indentation. So for this here, this is on like level 2. I'll use 1 basically. So this is level 1, level 2. And you can see there's just some like extra space over here. Right. So this drag handle bleeds outside of the hitbox of these menu items, which are either anchors or button elements. So this works as you would expect. You can drag from the drag handle. A lot of people kind of go, oh, I want to drag from, I think there's an icon, I'm going to drag from that. Great. So that works on the second level. Now, unfortunately, on the top level, if you go, oh, I want to drag from that, it disappears. Right. And that was because, like, it's not in the element anymore. And it had pointer events none on it, I think, which is why it didn't do that. So, I mean, the answer here was, it sounds straightforward, but I'm going to keep going with it, was to put pointer events auto on it. So it's actually still part of the hitbox of the element, so you can still drag from it. Because it is nice to be able to drag from that icon if you want to. But how and why does this work? So it turns out that if you have an element, let's say a button, and you have a child of that element that uses position absolute, right? And the button itself had position relative on it. If that position absolute element stretches outside of the bounds of the parent, it's actually included in the hit zone for that parent element, even though visually it then extends outside of the element, right? So here, this pink bar is technically a child of that item, but you can click it, engage with it, drag it, everything from over here. So this is it in action. So yeah, you can see you can click items, but I'm triggering all the hover styles and stuff basically outside of the element. This is something we use. It's a really nice thing we use in the sidebar because it means you can just move your cursor vertically and we can have nicely indented items, but we can still have hit zones the whole way down, up and down. Yes. You have to explicit. No, you don't have to explicitly say pointer events auto. That was only for this icon because I think by default our icons had like pointer event none on them. It was just a little thing. So that is position absolute. It's a child of that thing. It's stretching outside of the bounds, so it's included in the hit zone. Yeah, so really nice. Yeah, all this just for an icon. And yeah, we also added right to left support. So the whole new nav supports like right to left. Not all of our applications support right to left yet, but the navigation does. So yeah, we've built that in so it shows on the correct side. We ran into this really interesting bug in Safari as part of doing this. You'll see I'm going over these items and what is happening like that. What's happening with that text there? So it turns out that there is a bug in Safari with subgrid. And so I won't go into all the CSS details of how the menu items work, but it uses a really creative use of grid and subgrid. But it turns out that in Safari, if you have a child of a subgrid or a subgrid child, can't remember which of the two, and it goes from display none to something else, or it's dynamically inserted, either of those two things, Safari just like its layout calculation gets messed up and it can't figure out like auto columns anymore and it just kind of breaks, which is what we saw before. So that was, yeah, fun to stumble onto. But it turns out the solution is pretty simple for us. You just put this element as a child of the subgrid rather than as a subgrid sibling, and then the issue kind of just goes away. So that's nice. It is like sidestep the issues. Right, but that's fine. We got the exact same experience we wanted. But yeah, just a little thing. This is a demo of that bug. I think that's on we put on the bug report. You can see that subgrid child element. You can see it kind of just stretches out awkwardly. Good times. Yeah. No, it's fun. It's fun. It's part of the fun of working on the web for sure. All right. So I spent a long time talking about an icon. Okay, let's talk about this cursor. Cursor grab. So this is, the second part of our communication that something's draggable. When you're over an item, it changes from pointer to grab hand. So how do we do? We want this grab cursor after a delay. It's a really nice communication that this thing's draggable, but we do want it after a delay. This is what it looks like if it's no delay. You'll see it's doesn't feel very good, does it? Especially because I think the main interaction for these items is that pointer, like clicking on stuff. To have that grab hand be there all the time, feels like it just doesn't feel right. So if we go back, you'll see, you can move and you don't get that drag hand. And then when you're over an item for a certain amount of time, you get that cursor thing. So, ideally we could just do something like this, menu item, hover, cursor, grab, we're done. And that would be great. And that's actually what we had pretty much for that first example where it's just showing the grab hand. But what we really want to do is we want to apply that, just not right away. We just want to wait a little bit. For us, we want to wait 800 milliseconds. So we want that style, but we don't want it straight away. So, what are we going to do? All right, so let's go back to demos. At demo time. I will do the dance back because I do not know the keyboard shortcut anymore. Okay. Okay, cool. So you don't need to see the code, so I will keep it pretty small because at the end of the day, it's not that important. But what I do want to show is that this is like usually how you would do something like this, where you would effectively use JavaScript to do it. So let's go over here. I'm going to move my cursor over here, turn to the grab hand after 800 milliseconds. And then when I leave, it's back to normal. And then when I come back in, it's not, and then it turns again and it goes out. So you can see there's a lot of code in here I had to write. This isn't using React. This is just like vanilla. I'm going to say JavaScript, but it is TypeScript. I don't know, vanilla JavaScript. So there's a few things you need to handle. So for example, like it's not as simple as just start a timer, done. Like you kind of need to handle the case of, well, what happens if they go in and out, right? You kind of need to cancel that timer so that when they go in again, they don't get the grab hand straight away. There's just code in here, like when they mouse enter, I'm going to start a delay. In this case, I'm just toggling a class, but if you're using React, this would be like a set state. And again, I'm trying to avoid set state because if it's an expensive component, you're just asking React to do this work to apply as new styles. Not ideal, right? A lot of work, a lot of code really to do like a delayed style change. So thankfully, there is a CSS way. And it is to abuse CSS animations. So let me step you through it. First, let me show you, I'll show you the code first. So here is our CSS animations. We're going to call it cursor change to cursor grab. You would not think that would work, but it does. So then we're going to say, okay, animation name is cursor change. We're going to have an instant animation, right? If you change it to anything other than 0, it doesn't really work anyway. But what would that even do? I don't know. But so we're saying it's like instant. We're going to delay the cursor change. Here is the magic, 800 milliseconds. And then we're going to have animation fill mode forward. So what this means is that when the animation finishes, it's going to stay at that last frame, as opposed to the default, which is, I think, goes back to the beginning. Staying at the last frame, which for us is the new cursor value, right? So we got it. We come up here. Boom. Right? Delayed cursor change. This works in all the browsers, which is lovely. It handles the whole like canceling the timer problem, right? I can go in and out and it's just the platform doing it, right? It's handling all of the like, the timing got canned, like I'm going to start it again. Didn't have to write any of that code. It's just a few lines of CSS and we're done. So we're sidestepping React. We're writing heaps less code, right? We don't have to worry about all these weird edge cases. Lovely. So yeah, that's how we do the delayed cursor grab. I will now switch back. Extend. Oh, once the item is always, so the question was, does it, once it goes to the grab hand, can you still click it? Yeah, technically it's draggable from the beginning. This is just a visual thing. And the browser takes care of handling, like, is it a click or is it a drag? This is purely just a visual thing. Yeah.
Start dragging, does it change the cursor?
If you start dragging, it does change the cursor. Yeah. The platform takes care of what happens with the cursor once the drag starts. Yeah. Cool. So that's it. Lovely. Looks really good. All right. So, yes. Yeah, there's a lot of detail that goes into making these things, right? I think we kind of know that when we were building these things, but yeah, here we are in the journey. This is a bit facetious, a bit an exaggeration, but yeah, we haven't even actually started dragging yet, and this is what we've been talking about. I don't know how long it's been. A while. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. All right, start of the drag. The other sections are not as long. Okay, start of a drag. The goal is we want to make it clear what is being dragged, right? That's the goal. So this is what we do. Now, this is our pretty standard affordances that we use in a lot of experiences. First up, here we go. First up is we dim the dragging item. That's to give a clue that this is the thing that was being dragged. We don't collapse it, because if you collapse it, it can have all these weird flow-on effects in terms of, like, what if it was a big thing and it's gone and, like, you've lost your position? It turns out to be generally a really nice pattern just to keep it in place and dim it. What else? Yes, so we've got this drag preview here. So this is a native drag preview that the platform is helping us render. And you can't see it from here, but it is in this particular example, but it is, we have designed this. This is a component that's doing this, and it can only accept a very small amount of information. So what we've done is those menu items in the nav can have quite a lot of information in them, text, descriptions, actions, etc. And the intention is that this drag handle is very, like, small, the smallest representation of that thing. So I think it's just the element before, if it exists, and the content. That's kind of it. And we also push it away from the user's cursor. Now, I've had a separate talk about this, so I won't go into all the weeds of it, but I will just mention that how we do that is actually magic, which is the API for doing native drag previews is really gnarly. But anyway, what we do is when we're generating that preview, we actually use a transparent border around that image that's being dragged, and that's what pushes the drag preview away from the pointer a little bit visually. That was the only way we found that worked across all the browsers. So that already exists, but what we added as well was the ability. We have a helper, an optional helper in pragmatic drag and drop for doing this pushing away. We updated that helper to be right to left aware. So if you're in an experience that is right to left, it will now automatically just do it on the other side. So it puts a border around there. That was really interesting to do because unfortunately we couldn't use CSS logical properties for that because of how the API works for native drag previews. We actually had to, in JavaScript, know what the direction was. And it turns out that the most reliable way to do that was window.getComputed_styles.direction on that element to get it. Not ideal, but it seems to be performance-wise totally fine. It's not an issue. It's only used in one place when the drag's starting. It's in this, it doesn't matter how long it takes. But also it's an optional thing as well. So if you don't need it, you don't need to pay any code for that. Cool. So this is what it looks like. I think. There we go. That's right. What right to left looks like, I should say. I don't know why I've got a giant cursor out there on that, but there we go. So yeah, it pushes away on the other side. Now, interestingly, while we were doing this, we're looking at iOS. So it turns out that while I was doing this, I noticed that this pushing away, this transparent border trick on iOS was that border was always black. Like no matter what I did, it was always black. This was something that existed, but I just hadn't really dug into it too much. And it also turns out that during the drag, iOS only, basically, even if you start with that, like always just pushes the drag preview underneath the center of the user's touch. So you're kind of dragging that thing around, which doesn't look great. So what we do now is in that helper to help with pushing away, we now basically check if you're running on iOS. And if we do, we just don't do that pushing away and we just do this so that it'll look great on iOS, because there's pretty much no point pushing it away only for iOS to push it back anyway. And we couldn't find a way to get rid of the black border. So yeah, just lean into that one, I suppose. So this is what that looks like now on iOS. You have to take my word for it because you can't see my pointer, but yeah, it is now kind of just in the center. Cool. Time for another demo. This one is to do with a fun Firefox bug. Change to entire. I think I did the wrong one. Okay. Screen mirroring, change to be. Yeah. Okay. I think I just didn't click the button. All right. So on to Firefox. Turns out there's this really gnarly issue with Firefox. So our menu items in the sidebar are either anchors or buttons, where this is in Firefox only. So this is a button, you can drag it. However, you cannot drag a button from a pseudo element before. You can't drag it from the pseudo element after. And you also can't drag it from basically the padding around the text. So that's not great. You can drag it from here, but nowhere else. This is a really long-standing open bug in Firefox. I stumbled into it because of this. I was like, oh, why can't that happen? And then it turned out, oh, this is actually a bigger issue. However, we found a workaround, and it's relatively straightforward, and that is you effectively put a span inside your button and make that take up the full size of the button. And then you can drag it from anywhere. So you can drag from above, below, to the side, here. So yeah, that was an interesting thing. It's a bit lame that we have to do this sort of stuff, but you know, thankfully we can hide this behind our API. So generally, like folks working on Atlassian products don't have to deal with this. This is all just like hidden away from them. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, pretty simple workaround, but a really annoying bug. Cool. Go back here, change to extended. All right. Yeah, so if you stumble into that bug, I actually left this comment there on the Bugzilla for Firefox, which sort of just explains the workaround and what you have to do. Yeah. Okay. We also ran into an issue on Android. So this is drag and drop working on Android when you're dragging buttons in the sidebar. So that again was happening pretty quick. Yeah, so you can drag and drop that. However, something really bad happens when you try and drag an anchor element. And I'll just show you how this is just a standalone example that we put in the bug report for Android. How this is iOS. So if you can drag anchors, and what happens is you get this like context menu whenever you do a long press on an anchor, you get this like context menu that pops up. Now, what iOS does is if you keep dragging, it'll hide that context menu and allow you to drag after the context menu is there. And it also supports that CSS property, WebKit touch callout none, and then you don't get that pop-up menu at all. So you can just do drag and drop. So I think that's actually perfect because it means you can still do drag and drop even when there's the context menu. You just have to do it after it's kind of hidden. And you, as a developer, can disable it if you think it's not useful. However, Android just always will show this context menu. So this is me trying to drag. You can't. Like if it gets shown, you can't do a drag anymore. Can't do a drag, even if you use this WebKit touch callout, as I'm about to do, that doesn't work. It's basically no way to opt out. I'm pretty confident there's no way to opt out because I was talking with the Chrome folks and I don't think there is. So what do? I put together a CSS proposal called like making touch call out like a formalized part of the web platform as opposed to just a WebKit specific thing. So we'll see how that goes. I'm also in the active bug with Chrome talking about it. I think what iOS does by default is probably what Chrome should do by default, even if they don't support this, which is if you're just dragging outside the context menu, you should just close it. But yeah, we'll see how we go. So what does that mean for Android today? Well, for us, it's not super high usage, so it's not like the end of the world. So what we have this fallback mechanism, which I'll talk about the accessibility stuff, but you can still achieve all the same things. You just won't necessarily be able to do it using drag and drop. I think this is coming up. Yeah, so not ideal. There may be a more heavy-handed way to achieve this, but it's just one of those things. I'm sure you can relate. Like it's like not many people use it. There's a really easy, valid side path to doing it. Like, do we want to invest heaps of time into fixing this right now? Can we hopefully Chrome just fix it soon? That would be great. If it becomes an issue, I'm sure like there's some crazy stuff we do for some cases. I'm pretty confident we'd find a way, but for now, on Android, anchors are no good. So there was another bug we ran into. So we use WebKit line clamping to do the concatenation of text in here when they get too big. We're actually thinking of moving away from that because we don't actually need it in this case. We're using a primitive component called text, which uses it. All that's to say, we do use it today. And I guess it's really a weird bug in native drag previews where you can see that the drag preview is being concatenated, the text, even though the text there was not concatenated and there was room. It looks like the spacing algorithm for that they use to determine how wide it is not including the space for ellipsis. So if you kind of squint, if you write the PHY in there, it would fit, but then they put the ellipsis on it. So it's just kind of balked. So what do? Well, we have for this experience, we have some WebKit. We basically go like, is Safari effectively, and we just give it some extra space manually. Not ideal, but it was a way to get over that hump. We're probably going to move away from that styling in here anyway. So it won't hopefully be super long-lived, but at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing ever. Just add a bit of space. It's fine. We can't figure out how much space it needs to be and add on. We basically just have to set it to pretty much the max size that drag previews can be, which can look a bit funny sometimes because you're dragging something small and it's a bit bigger, but it's hopefully only a temporary thing, but yeah, a way to get around that issue anyway. Cool. Okay. What are we talking about? Drag and drop. Oh yeah. So we've now talked about the drag start. We're still going. I know this is when I was writing this talk, the idea was like to try and go through like all the little things, So here we are. So while we're dragging, make it clear what the result will be. That's the intention. That's what we want to do. When the drag's happening, we want to make it super clear to a user, like what's going to happen, like when you drop. Okay. So the primary ways we do that is with lines and the group drop indicator. So the line is sort of communicating position and the group drop indicator is communicating which area of the nav are you kind of working in at the moment. So you can kind of see that like in action here. Yep, pretty cool. Now, our group drop indicator does have a little bit of an outline around it in terms of that. So we use the CSS outline and we push it out a bit. Now, there is a reason we do that. This is probably one of the big ones. Firstly, I think it looks cool, right? I think that looks really nice. But if we don't have it bleeding out a little bit, you can see it starts to like get really awkward in terms of the spacing in there. We don't really want lines going over the top of other lines, right? So that's why we do that nesting out. Now, in cases where we have grouping, which I'll explain, like if we didn't have that spacing, yeah, it looks pretty cooked on the left, whereas I think with that extra little bleeding out, it looks quite nice. So we do the blue line and then we got that blue background we pop in as well, just to really like the subtle blue background. And we've also made it work for right to left. So that group drop indicator line, that is an optional package that anyone can use. The line and that group drop indicator anyone can use. We updated that line to be automatically aware of right to left. So if you're using it today and you want it has support right to left. It'll just work, which is really nice. And as part of this cleaning that up, we also moved those particular outputs from Emotion.js to compiled CSS in JS, which is a whole thing. But if you're interested, I did make a YouTube video about it, which kind of goes over a high level. But effectively, we're now doing like build time CSS, and we just ship like a little CSS file along with the package, and like pretty much no runtime, which is really lovely. So all that's to say, if you wanted to use these components, and it pretty much doesn't matter what styling stack you're using. It's a very small payload now. Cool. So we also support trees. So we did a lot of work with trees for Confluence a few years ago to get drag and drop working in their trees. And this is like standing on that shoulders. So we can support, dragging into children, making new groups, pretty much, changing order, anything really. So first thing we do is when you're dragging so here, filter 2 right now is actually an expandable menu item, but its icon you can't see. There's a design decision that if it has, you can have a chevron with an icon and it swaps when you go hover. That aside, when you start dragging something that could potentially go into or onto something that is expandable, what we do is so you can see as soon as the drag started, that filter 2's icon changed to be a chevron. And that's to sort of give an extra clue that there's something more here you can do. Otherwise, you just wouldn't know. So that's what we do. We also, when you're over a group for 500 milliseconds, we expand that group. So you can drag into it, which is really nice. If you're dragging a group that is expanded, we collapse that group before you start the drag. And then when you finish the drag, we'll re-expand it. The big reason we do that is to stop the awkwardness around like, well, what if you drag into yourself, right? It doesn't really make sense for a parent to drag under itself. So we collapse it. I think there was another reason too, but I think that's the primary one. So when we were looking at trees a few years ago for Confluence, we created this like hitbox. So pragmatic drag and drop, you can do whatever you want during the drag. We've created this abstraction called hitboxes where, when you're dragging over an element, it can basically return you a string and say like, hey, at the moment you're in the make child area. And then you can get that and go, okay, I'm going to show a blue border, and when it drops, I'm going to merge these items, right? And so we had this very rich thinking about how to do all this. And one of the pieces of feedback though was like, this is pretty rigid and doesn't really leave room for like enabling, like it's just very rigid in how it's fine for Confluence and what they're doing. Everything can drag everywhere all at once, but in a nav, it's like every item could have support different things, right? We just don't know. So what we've gone for now is an evolution of that on Usable 4. And it's the idea that every menu item can support up to 3 operations, reorder before, combine, and reorder after. And when you're setting it up, when you're wiring it up, you get to decide which of those is available for this menu item. And you get to decide during the drag, like you don't have to decide once, you can decide every basically like tick, I'm going to change what operations are available. And what happens is the hitbox on that item will dynamically change based on what operations are available. Right? So if you got all 3, it's kind of split up like quarter, half, quarter, I think. And then if you just got reorder before and reorder after, it's like half, half, and then, third, 2/3. I can't remember the exact numbers, but that's the idea, right? Like you can just throw any combination of these things at it and it will figure out what the best hitbox should have been to feel good. I'll go back. So this tree you can achieve with that other one, right? It's just sort of a lower level way of expressing this. You just have to put it together a little bit more, with the exception of pulling back levels. I won't go into that, but we found that wasn't really a heavily used feature and introduced. That's the idea that, in certain cases you can pull back to another level. But what we found is it's not really used in production that much, very little actually. And it sort of breaks that model that you can just drag something up and down the tree anywhere and it'll have the same outcome. It was like for one particular entity, we introduced horizontal, and then so it's like, well, like you're introducing horizontal, like now they need to care about horizontal as well, whereas otherwise it's just all vertical. That's to say that for now that we've taken that out. Cool. And also we've designed this new hitbox system to work if you have menu items that are horizontal instead of vertical, in terms of you want the hitboxes to work like that. You can use these hitboxes. So if you're using pragmatic drag and drop and you want to use this exact system for a list or for anything else, you can use it. And that doesn't mean you have to use any of our visual affordances or anything. It's just a way to get information about the entity you're dragging over. You can just use that and you're kind of good to go. Cool, we're up to the end now, or close to the end. On drop, the goal is we want to immediately update the interface. So we want to reflect straight away what the user has done, right? We don't want to show any loading or anything like that. So the idea is that effectively products control the state, but what we recommend happens is you do an optimistic update in React state, and then you kind of synchronize it to the server, right, after the fact. They can do lots of operations really quickly. We also flash the item that is dropped. So this is, when I drop this item, it's going to flash blue. I've slowed it down a little bit. It can be a bit hard to see in this recording because the compression is pretty high. But yeah, so it kind of like flashes that blue color when it lands. We do that just to give an extra little clue that this is the thing that's moved. Like it's now like cemented in this place, right? That's it slowed down. This is more it at regular speed. Just like hopefully something just really subtle just to like give a clue that this thing's landed there. Okay, cool. So done the flash. How do we do the flash? That's a really interesting question. Usually, when you say if you're doing reordering, I'm going to talk about React now. When you do, I've been talking for ages. I know this is such a long talk. All right. We're going to swap A with C, right? That's what we want to do. And we want to flash item A. Like, how do we do this? How do we do this in React? Obviously we could just query the DOM and give me item A and add a class or call the animate functions on it, right? But how do we do this in kind of a React-y way? Or how should we do this in React? And it runs into this problem that I do see a lot, which is like, how do you send a one-time message in React? This is something that I've been thinking about for years, actually. So this is like a way to do it, right? You have a prop, should flash, get a value, and you add a class name, which does a flash. Great. If you don't want to do prop drilling, you could achieve a similar thing with context, right? Like you put this ID on the context and then everything is aware of it. Now, this has a few problems. Firstly, every time you update that ID, basically anything listening to this context has to re-render to get that new value. Not ideal if you have lots of these things. It can be pretty expensive to do it like that. That's one thing. But what do we like? Do we render with this value and then do we render again with like a null value to clear it? Or do we just so effectively have to do two? Because if we don't do two, the trouble is, let's say you were dragging, item A, be flashed, and then you did it again, like flash ID would still be item A. And so you're not going to get that reflash because it was already set. So you kind of I've seen this before, right? Like you set a prop in context, you let it go, and then maybe in effect, you basically unwind it and you just do like another render to basically clear it, which is not great. So this is a way you could do it, where instead you put like here, let's imagine this thing called should flash context, and instead of returning an ID, it returns a subscribe function. And then inside of our effect, we set up an event listener. Now this is going to return us back a function, which we can return down here to clean up the subscription. And it's going to give us the ID of the thing that needs to flash. And if the ID matches what we are, we set some React state. Otherwise, we're going to set it to false. Like it's fine to set lots of things to false because if it's already false, it'll just like no op. And then that way we could, do something like that. Now, even just looking at this, I can already see it's problematic, right? Because once this is set to true, like we're not unsetting it, right? So if we get that message again, like you've kind of, you need to manage that, right? You probably need to have another effect or something to like clear it. Oh, horrible. So yeah, still not even ideal. Okay, so this is what we do. Technically, it's not in our pieces. This is just like a pattern that we recommend folks use. We use this pattern a fair bit for a few things. So the idea is that instead of, this is how we handle like this one-way communication in this case. So what you do here is similar to before, we're getting something off the context. We're going to call it register. It's a register function. And now we're going to get a ref here, which is going to refer to this element. And inside our effect, what we're going to do is firstly, we're going to check that we have actually set up that ref. Invariant is just we'll throw an error if that thing's not set, and it narrows the type in TypeScript, which is really nice. And then you just get, I'm going to call register, which is from the context, and I'm going to pass in item ID and element. Okay. So now that registry, it has access. It knows like this is the item ID and this is the element that it points to. Okay. And what we can do is we can effectively on our list have this thing sitting on context, which just everything's just publishing to it. It just stores like this big old map of IDs to elements. And now this thing in the context, high in the tree, can effectively reach into any DOM element it wants without having to talk to React, right? So what do we do? Before, I'll go you through the life cycle. Before the drag, everything registers with the registry. Drag's happening during the drag. User's dragging item A, it's going beneath the item C, right? The drop, state update. So React needs to do a state update to re-render these things, to put these things in the right place. Then the registry will be updated. Now this, for a reorder, generally won't happen because React won't actually unmount item A and move it to, and remount it. It'll just move it potentially in the DOM and won't actually unmount, remount. And so it still could be the same element, right? But if there are scenarios where they will actually be mounted, unmounted. Basically, we give time after that state update. We allow time for all these effects to run to update the registry if they need to say like, this is my DOM element, right? We may have had a new items created. We might have had some removed. We might have had whatever, right? So it's still basically the registry after the state update has pointers to everything. Now, once that has completely flushed, we can then the registry can go, all right, give me like basically look up in the set in the map, like, all right, give me item A's element. It has the element, and then it can just do the dot animate, the animation API. Didn't have to talk to item A to do it. It could just like do it from up there because it had access to the element. And that's it, right? One-time message done. Don't have to worry about kind of like sending messages down the tree, clearing them, anything, right? It's basically just got like a backdoor into all the elements. Yeah, so that's a really powerful pattern for, this type of thing. This is how we get the Flash. So accessibility. I'm just going to absolutely blitz through this. I've been talking for so long. I think it's like an hour now, but or maybe more. But there is a document which talks about this in detail if you are interested. But the goal of what we're trying to do is to enable users of assistive technologies to achieve the same outcomes as drag and drop in a way that's delightful for them. Not necessarily to get assistive technologies to perform drag and drop, right? But instead, like, what would be a delightful way for somebody using a keyboard and a screen reader to achieve these outcomes? Like, don't even think about drag and drop. Like, we don't have to have input parity to have outcome parity. And in fact, if you lean into that outcome parity, like you can actually design experiences that are best for different types of input modalities, right? So this is, what we do here. So we offer the general pattern is we have these sort of like menus where you can go in and like move up, move down, move to top, move to bottom, right? That all kind of works with the screen reader as well. This is a more complex one where, it's a tree operation. So instead, I skipped through that. Yeah. So what's going to happen here is instead of popping a little dialogue, it's going to pop a modal, right? So anything where you need some more rich information, like you just pop a modal and put whatever form you want in there. Like they can put anything, you can put whatever you want to describe the operation that they want to achieve.
Pragmatic, well, this is what you did.
The question was, is this part of pragmatic or is this what we did for Atlassian? So pragmatic is lots of pieces. So it's not in like the core drag and drop functionality pieces, but there are other pieces that we've built to support this, optional pieces. This particular experience gets a bit dicey because like if you're not using the Atlassian design system, you probably don't want to use our pop-ups and all that. So we've designed, I guess, we have like, the live reader announcer, we have, the patterns, the examples, but generally like those experiences, if you're using a different UI library, like you'll usually just follow that pattern, but you'll be wiring it up yourself. Yeah. And the nice thing about that is there are actually there are some experiences where maybe that's not the best choice in terms of the experience. There may be other choices that are better for other things. So yeah. So to answer your question, no, it's not baked into the drag and drop part of it. And our friend, the registry, makes a comeback. We actually use that here as well because we had access to the element. We can use it to, dot focus on this new element. So something that's really important in our keyboard story is once they've moved the element, we want to give that element focus again. Like it might lose focus. In fact, it often does, right, as you're navigating around. So if we can give that item focus again, it means that users can continue to interact with the same element. They don't have to go searching for it again. Like they're back straight on it. And also that's what we use to talk to the live region as well. Sorry, not the registry, the list. The list will talk to the live region. So it's the one in this case, managing the state. You can manage the state any way you want, but it's the one sort of handling the state updates. And so it says like, hey, live region, like this is what happened, like tell the screen reader. I glossed over so many details there, but we are, yeah, I think that's probably fine for folks. Now, if you are interested in some more details, I know maybe if an hour and a bit wasn't enough, I've put together a big document which basically goes over everything that I talked about. There's a QR code there if you're interested. It has the example you can play with, but probably most importantly, if you're like thinking about doing navigations, like you don't have to use a line of our code, but you can like absolutely like go to town on all that thinking if you want. Or on the other hand, you could use a lot of our low-level primitives and do a different design language, or you could use our low-level primitives and our design language. Like it's kind of up to you. Or just ignore it or use it, up to you. But yeah, so it kind of goes into that as well as much more information about the accessible stuff that I kind of glossed over. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
That was amazing. I'm sure there is, even though you've spoken for a little bit over an hour, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sure there are still some questions in the audience. So we've got a microphone we can throw to people.
It's working. Okay.
Here we go. Let's go.
Did you get to meet, talk to anybody about standards or change anything like massive and with Mozilla, or like, get some attention that you were just like, whoa, I didn't think that I'd get this high up or anything?
Yeah, so I've been really, really lucky to work in this problem space for like a long time. I'm a pretty obsessive person, and that's kind of played out pretty nicely here. But yeah, I have had really great conversations with a lot of folks, and yeah, the web platform is getting better. Like bugs get fixed every so often. We're not seeing a lot of like this drag and drop functionality stuff is pretty old. Like it's an early API. I've given another talk previously, which I talked about a few standards proposals, many standards proposals I was planning on making. I haven't done that. But yeah, I have had the opportunity to speak to a few folks. Have I gotten heaps and heaps of traction? No, I guess not heaps, but it's, yeah. I don't know how much more to answer that. I'll leave it there.
That's cool. That was sort of,
Yeah.
Hello, thanks for the talk. I presume you looked at other like prior art before you set out for months to build your own? And if so, was there like, why is this better? And were there any others that you find interesting? Any other drag and drop libraries?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't give much of an introduction. So I wrote React Beautiful D&D, which you might remember from a few years ago. And yeah, a few years after that, we actually pivoted away from React Beautiful D&D to pragmatic drag and drop. There's another talk you can watch about that, about why we did it. Primarily, it was about performance and flexibility, right? By leaning into the web platform, we could get so much of both of those things. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the options out there. So this particular implement was effectively like pragmatic drag and drop didn't really change. You know, the actual library, some of the optional outputs we added like right to left support to, or converted them over to compile. But this journey was primarily like me and another designer over 2 months to build out we pretty much already had the guidelines as well around like how to do it, but it was more just the little details about how do we get this feeling really, really nice for the navigation specifically. Yeah. And was there anything like that group drop indicator was something we didn't have in our guidelines before we started, but we've now since added them in because it was so good, especially for nested structures, to give that extra clarity around what level and what group you were kind of interacting with. I mean, answer another question about other options though.
So in the spirit of all the little things,
Yeah.
have you tried it in Ladybird? And does it work?
I'm going to say no. I don't think I've even done another. I don't have it.
A brand new browser.
I don't know. I have to check. If is its own rendering engine? Well, then I have to check that. Yeah, not sure. As long as they support the web standards for drag and drop, then it should be fine. Yeah, but maybe you can follow that link and try it out. And if there's anything that we need to change, or yeah, we can.
Any more questions?
One more, one last one.
How long does it take to build all the small things?
Yeah, so that I mean, it's a bit hard. It's hard because in this space, like it's easy to write code with code you're familiar with, you know, and like this isn't my first rodeo in terms of creating an experience, but this one, yeah, give or take, was like 2 months to put all the
From the
docs
beginning?
together and all the.
No, I mean, it's like from the beginning when it
Oh.
said like, okay, you need to have a drag and drop. And then when it's like, yeah, now it's done. How long does it take?
All right. Well, I wouldn't go on the journey that I've gone on. I would just use one of the libraries that exist, right? So, I mean, my journey with drag and drop is like being 5 or 6 years at this point. Yeah,
It's a lot.
and a hobby before that. So, yeah, not full time, you know, on and off, but I don't know. It's just I'm a bit obsessive. So
it's not small things; it's a big thing. For
yeah,
5, 6
but in my experience, like the best software isn't really that. It's just thinking about things like a lot and just doing a lot of little things really well, like adds up to something really great.
Yep.
Like that's my experience in software.
Yeah, thank you.
We have time for one more.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to. So.
Hey Alex, thanks for the talk.
Okay.
I thought it really shows the scalability of design systems with the amount of work that's gone into that you can then push it out to make it so much easier for everyone else. My question is, did you work with any designers on the project, and were there any trade-offs you had to make with maybe their vision for the experience and, you know, the limitations of browsers?
Yeah. Oh, yes to all. Yeah. So I worked with one designer in particular, Rich. Can't remember his last name right now. But yeah, I said I worked on it like pretty much everything we do is not really by, like, I'm running everything by 2 designers at least, maybe 3, and we also have a few engineers that were kind of like, oh, should we do this? Like, what about this prop? Does that make sense? Like, what about this pattern? You know, so. But with design, it was very like give and take in a sense. Like, I don't know if there was anything that they wanted that we didn't get. And also, I think at this point, at least in Atlassian, the limitations of the web platform are more known. And so if you look in the design guidelines on for pragmatic drag and drop, they're optional, but there's a link near there which is talking about some of the constraints of the web platform. And now that we've gone through the hard work organizationally of deciding on these, how, like, the language, it's pretty robust at this point. And so a lot of the work is just like minor tweaks, or not really reinventing, because we've gone through a lot of that already. Yeah.
Cheers.
I don't think there was anything big we had to say no to. If anything, it was the other end. I think they only wanted, I just want reordering. It's like, nah, we can do like all of it, you know, we can do all of it. Because if we design it in such a way, we don't need to, if we build the right Lego bricks, like, doesn't matter if it's reordering, moving between groups, making trees, whatever, like, you just set it all up. Yeah, you can do whatever they want.
Nice. Thank you.
Is that our last one?
Yeah. Thanks a lot for this talking. Just bring me back to the work. Feels like lots of little things.
Yeah.
So
All the little things.
yeah. For my question is, so it seems like today your presentations focused on the implementation.
Yeah.
So is there post bug in a major bug? So unexpected? Or
Major bug expected.
oh yeah, just like after implementation.
Yeah.
So there's quite often some bugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is something very surprising or something come up like which is unexpected?
Yeah. What if something comes up that's unexpected?
Yeah.
Thankfully, at Atlassian, we have a pretty good grip on what's going on in production.
Yep.
Through monitoring, so we're kind of aware of, you know, how many people are moving pages in Confluence and whatever it is, right? And when certain of these numbers fall outside of normal bands, you know, there's alerts and stuff. So that's one way. I mean, my big preference, we have a lot of quality controls ahead of time, which I love. You know, I want to be pretty confident that I'm putting stuff out there that works. So we have a combination of like browser tests for drag and drop, visual regression tests, which are awesome. So we can like snapshot at various points in a drag and drop interaction in all browsers, like what's happening. That's just so good. And obviously like unit tests as well. What do we do if there's a bug? I don't know. You know, we've got to deal with it. Hopefully it's the stuff that there's stable. I mean, as with any software, like if something bad happens, we have to figure out what to do. Yeah, thankfully though, drag and drop, like, especially because there's those secondary ways to achieve the same outcomes. Like worst case, if it just stopped working tomorrow, like technically people could still get their work done maybe, you know, with some of those menus, but wouldn't be very good. But it might buy some time.
Yeah.
But no, we haven't had anything like that, thankfully, in the many years that we've been using it.
I actually can't really think of, although I'm like a Confluence user before, but I don't really have in scenarios because I fixed bug before about reordering or something.
Yeah.
There's quite really, if in that list environment, there's a lot of things actually involved.
Yes, that's right.
With reordering, then you have to update all the different state of thing.
Yeah.
So quite often there's a bugs on the state involved other components.
That's totally right. So
yeah.
A lot of drag and drop libraries, pragmatic drag and drop included, will handle the interaction for you and tell you what's happening. But you're right in saying that that's just a piece of it. Like the whole state management state, that's often where you'll find potential bugs where their optimistic updates stop working, or they stopped syncing to the server, or they didn't do an optimistic update and the UI is like broken and then it goes into the right state. You know, state, yeah, that does come up. But that's, you know, state management can be tricky in apps. But
thank you.
Yeah. We've seen less of those issues come up. I think it's a bit more known how to do it in React. And our front ends are consolidating a lot on Relay, and they have some pretty good stories around optimistic updates and how to handle that. Cool. Thank you everyone for your patience. Really appreciate it.
Can we please thank Alex for his time? Big round of applause.